Welcome to this Florida Department of Transportation training. Assessing Relocation Potential is part of the department's video series providing guidance for sociocultural effects evaluations for transportation projects. This training is divided into two parts. The first part examines potential community effects associated with project-related relocations, and the second part of the training describes a process for identifying and assessing potential relocation effects. Let's get started. Sociocultural effects evaluation focuses on 6 sociocultural issues, including relocation potential. Together, the SCE issues create a framework for assessing potential project-related effects on communities. Relocation potential exists when additional land is needed for right-of-way to accommodate the project footprint, including associated infrastructure such as stormwater ponds and intersection approaches. When right-of-way needs involve developed property, the occupants of that development could be displaced by the project. The assessment of relocation-related effects during sociocultural effects evaluation is organized under 4 topics: residential uses, non-residential uses, community and institutional uses, and unique and special facilities. These topics are addressed in the department's SCE considerations. I will discuss each of the SCE considerations related to relocation potential, starting with residential uses. When residential structures lie in the project path, the inhabitants of those structures must be relocated, sometimes to another community. Relocated residents can experience social and psychological effects from changes in living environments, including one's home and neighborhood. Households can experience financial impacts from relocation through increased living expenses, property taxes, and commute costs. The effects of relocation, however, are not always negative. Often, relocated persons improve their quality of living through better housing, better neighborhoods, and lower living and travel expenses. To some population groups, relocation is a greater concern. Disabled and elderly persons tend to have difficulty adjusting to a new location and establishing new friendships and connections there. Plus, the physical strain of relocation bears more heavily on these groups. Minority households may have difficulty finding suitable relocation homes, especially when language is a factor. Relocated households with school-age children may have to find new schools and child care providers. Long-term residents have greater place attachment, which can lead to greater relocation-related stress. Affordable housing availability could prevent low-income households from relocating in the same community. These households are also more likely to depend on community-based social networks in the places they live. Likewise, the elderly, disabled, and limited English proficient often depend on local support networks that can be severed upon relocation. Non-residential uses, such as shops, restaurants, offices, and industrial uses, can suffer financially from relocation. Time and money costs are factors associated with finding, securing, and moving operations to a suitable location in a suitable facility. Existing customers may not be willing to travel to a new location, and existing employees may not be willing to change their commute. Businesses most disrupted by relocation tend to be small, locally owned businesses and businesses catering to a specific clientele or employing certain types of workers. The latter is often a concern for minority-owned businesses that could be impacted if separated from a minority customer base or employees. Some businesses may find it difficult to relocate due to their particular needs or the inability to find a location where they would be welcome. Relocation effects on community and institutional facilities, including churches, recreation centers, clubs, and schools, tend to be similar to those of small businesses. This is especially true of community facilities that derive financial or volunteer support from people or organizations in the surrounding area. In turn, community facilities often provide support to residents in nearby neighborhoods. Relocation out of the neighborhood could disrupt relationships that are essential to a facility's sustainability or diminish level of service to a facility's clientele. Unique and special facilities can serve as organizing features in a community, anchoring elements of space and time and engendering a sense of communal ownership. Such landmarks can make the communities they are located in more interesting and meaningful, and in so doing enhance quality of life. A unique or special facility may have special status by virtue of dominance of built form, outstanding shape, color, or extent, or significance in terms of function, symbolism, or history. An important consideration to the assessment of relocation effects is the likelihood a unique or special facility would or could be reestablished in the community. Right-of-way acquisition for transportation projects is performed through eminent domain in compliance with the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Policies Act. The Uniform Act, passed by Congress in 1970, is a federal law that establishes minimum standards for federally funded programs and projects that require the acquisition of real property or displace persons from their homes, businesses, or farms. Relocations for state-funded projects must also comply with Rule 14-66.007 of the Florida Administrative Code. This rule governs the provision of relocation services, including moving, replacement housing, and other related costs, to ensure fair, consistent, and equitable treatment of persons displaced as a direct result of any applicable transportation project. Now that we have framed the issues, let's walk through the process for identifying and assessing potential relocation effects. Identifying and assessing project effects are performed in Step 4 of the sociocultural effects evaluation process. At this point in the process, we will have already completed Steps 1 through 3, which involves reviewing the project information, defining a study area encompassing any areas with relocation potential, and collecting data describing the demographics and community resources in the study area. These steps are discussed in more detail in preparing for SCE evaluation, a video in the department's SCE evaluation training series. Evaluating relocation potential involves three main tasks: identifying sites with relocation potential and determining their level of importance to the community, assessing potential effects on those sites and the community, including both positive and negative effects, engaging the severity of any potential negative effects. The first task, Task A, is to review the community information compiled during preparation for the SCE evaluation. This information includes project information, demographic analysis, community resource data, and prior public input. Through this task, we begin learning about the community, its context, values, and ways of life that could be affected by the project. What is known about the project at the time of the sociocultural effects evaluation will be stated in the project description. This information describes the project purpose and need, the general facility type, such as a road or a bridge, the existing and proposed facility, including the geographic location and extent of project alternatives, and physical features such as the project width or footprint, and any other features of significance to the project environmental evaluation. By examining census data at the block group or block levels, we can see how various population groups are distributed within the study area and in relation to the project and community facilities. We need to know about the general resident population, as well as workers, business owners, and patrons, and population groups that are vulnerable to community change or have been historically underrepresented in transportation decision-making. By being aware of who is in the study area and where, we can identify population groups that could be affected as a result of the project and also avoid unintentional discriminatory actions. Learn more about the non-discrimination policies applicable to transportation decision-making in the department's Facilitating Equitable Outcomes video series. These videos are available on the department's SCE webpage. In preparation for sociocultural effects evaluation, information on a full spectrum of community resources is typically compiled from a resource database, such as the department's environmental screening tool. From the database information, select data depicting conditions on land within the dimensions of the estimated project footprint, including aerial imagery showing areas with existing development, county property appraiser parcel data showing property lines coinciding with the existing right-of-way, existing land use data indicating current parcel use, and community facilities data indicating the facility type, location, and ownership. Next, supplement the database information as needed to identify land uses and structures in proximity to the project footprint. Visit the project corridor to observe conditions on the ground. Also, talk to local government planning staff to learn more about parcels with relocation potential in terms of resident and business demographics, including employees and patrons, community and institutional facility characteristics, unique or special character that is valued by the community, and local policies, plans, or programs addressing those potential relocation areas. Then inventory any structures that could be displaced as a result of the project. Do this by comparing the footprint of the existing right-of-way to the proposed project right-of-way. The existing right-of-way width can be approximated using the county property appraiser parcel data. The proposed right-of-way width is usually unknown in the planning phase, so it must be estimated using the typical section width for a similar project type. Using aerial imagery and land use data, identify existing development that appears to be in the project path. In the planning phase, the project is very conceptual, so potential relocations will be a rough approximation. As such, potential relocations will be very generally described in terms of number and location in the SCE evaluation. In the project development phase, the project conceptual stage relocation plan is a principal data source for the assessment of relocation potential. Initially, the department's right-of-way staff prepares estimates of residential, business, and public facility displacements based on project alternatives information provided by the PD&E team. The estimates are used by the PD&E team in the sociocultural effects evaluation, which in turn informs the development of the conceptual stage relocation plan and the environmental document. You can learn more about the conceptual stage relocation plan, including when it's required and the information it must include, in Part 2, Chapter 9 of the Department's PD&E manual. If a community resource, such as a community facility, could be affected, its level of importance to the community is a factor in the assessment of effects. Public input from a previous project phase may be of help in assigning value. If prior public input is not available or is inadequate for the assessment, community outreach should be conducted. Task B, Assess Effects, is informed by the community inventory prepared in Task A and guidance from the department's SCE considerations. From this information, we examine the relationship between the project's physical characteristics and the community context to identify and assess potential relocation effects. Both positive and negative effects are assessed. During project development, the assessment considers potential direct and indirect effects, and if indicated, cumulative effects. A cumulative effects assessment is not required in a planning phase sociocultural effects evaluation, but related observations may be noted in the evaluation. To learn more on this topic, refer to the Cumulative Effects Evaluation Handbook on the department's website. The relocation potential topics addressed in the SCE considerations are repeated on the slide. You can view the SCE considerations in their entirety on the department's SCE webpage. By providing a response to the considerations that are relevant to the project will help ensure that your SCE evaluation is thorough. The level of investigation and detail that go into the responses will depend on the potential for effects and the severity of effects, which will be discussed later in Task C. As mentioned earlier, the sociocultural effects evaluation considers potential direct, indirect, and cumulative effects of a project. This image shows conditions prior to construction of a road widening and bridge replacement project. The dashed yellow line depicts the project right-of-way needs. This image shows post-project conditions. The yellow area shows where residences and businesses were displaced to accommodate the project. These displacements are considered direct effects. The photo insets show surrounding properties that have changed in character in the years following project construction. The lower photo is a city block that was once part of a village center. The photo above is of a nearby historic building that has been neglected and perhaps abandoned. If a relationship exists between these present conditions and the project, these changes would be considered an indirect effect, and possibly a cumulative effect if other actions were contributing. Task C, Gauge Severity of Effects, is the final task in assessing project effects. This involves assessing the character of potential relocation effects identified in Task B and their relationship to the community context. Consider the type, quality, and sensitivity of affected resources and their value to the community. Assess whether potential relocations would disproportionately affect any population group. Consider the likelihood that the relocations would be necessary. Also consider the scale and extent of potential relocations and their effect in combination with other effects, including direct, indirect, and cumulative effects, and in light of project benefits to the community. Factor the likelihood that the affected resource would be reestablished in the community, or if the displacement would be permanent. The severity of effects is also measured by the potential to resolve the effect through practicable mitigation. And finally, when gauging the severity of effects, be sure to seek input from the affected community. In the planning phase, obtaining feedback from a local government advisory committee or a neighborhood organization in the affected area may be sufficient to get a sense of how the larger study area community would perceive the effects. During project development, outreach is usually more extensive, especially if relocation potential is significant. This concludes the training on assessing relocation potential. If you have questions on this or other SCE evaluation-related topics, please contact Dr. Rusty Ennemoser, State Public Involvement and Community Resources Coordinator. Additional SCE resources are available on the department's SCE webpage. Informational resources referenced in this video are listed on the following slide. Thank you for viewing this production of the Florida Department of Transportation.